We had a great time tonight at the North Texas Jeep Club at Billy Bob's. I want to tell you all about it and some other things that we got going on and cover some ground. And then I've got kind of a long chapter to read to you. So we will get right to it here on the 20th episode of Beezy's Stream of Consciousness. And I am your humble host, Beezy, whom many songs and many puzzles have been composed. And we're here at Starbase One studio. We have once again, we have a truncated staff tonight. Only the Finland's in here with us. And, but I think he can handle everything. He doesn't have a great deal to do anyway, since we're completely automated. But I do want to give a shout out to Audacity for their technical expertise in putting the program together, as well as Podbean for their distributive prowess. You may be hearing this on other platforms, but that's because Podbean distributes it to them. So, all of that said, we took the Sea Goddess over to Billy Bob's, Texas, the world's largest honky-tonk in North Fort Worth on the north side. Some people call that Cowtown. That is a misnomer. Fort Worth is Cowtown. That's one of the nicknames of our fair burg here. We call that, the locals here, of which I am one, call that North Side. That is where the stockyards are located, and it's a historic area with cobblestone streets and little shops and all things Western, and that's where Billy Bob's is, and that's where we were tonight at the North Texas Jeep Club meetup, and it was the biggest event that Susan and I have been to, and there were it was Jeep heaven. That's what I said on X earlier. And if you love Jeeps, man, that was a place to be. Every color in the rainbow, every 2 doors, 4 doors, hard tops, soft tops, snow tops, doors on, doors off, lifted, stock, all lit up, blacked out, whatever you wanted. I mean, whatever your passion. And that's one of the things about the Jeep community that I love is that every Jeep is unique. No two are exactly alike. And because once you start doing your mods and doing all this stuff to them, I mean, you can light them up, you can lift them, you can switch out the rims and the tires, you can take off the fenders, you can do neat things with the lights, you can put decals on them. Lots of people name the Jeeps. There's all kinds of light bars and rock lights and all kinds of other things that you can do, and all kinds of fun things on the inside. So it's really a fun community to be part of, and everybody, for the most part, is very pleasant, is very helpful, is very joyful, and these things are just a lot of fun to go to. So. If you own a Jeep, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't own a Jeep and you're ever thinking about moving to that type of SUV, then I strongly encourage it. So, a lot of fun tonight, and it's late and we're all very tired, but I am going to proceed with my broadcast duties and read to you here momentarily, so stick around. All right, and here we go with story time. And I apologize earlier for the intro. I did have the wrong button pushed on my my out of control board, and so it may have sounded a little funny, but I've got that rectified. So this is chapter 10 of Cloaks and Barbs, and let's get started. Okay, Santiago 4. Well, that's a bit of bad luck, Hawthorne complained quietly after having installed the new fuses. Power had not been restored. All was still dark. He frowned at the fuse box and pursed his lips. He took the lamp from Barbara and shone it here and there, studying the metal conduits running to and from the box. Electrics were never my strong suit, he said at length with a shake of his head. I could be looking at His Majesty's arse and not know it. Well, what do you think is wrong, Group Captain? Look about you, Lieutenant, he said, frustrated. The fuses aren't working, ergo we're still in the dark. As to why, I can only imagine that there was a tremendous lightning strike that effectively toasted our electrics. For all we know, the whole of our wiring could be melted. It's made of copper, after all. So what do we do now, sir? Asked Carstairs. We cannot continue like this. None of our gear will work. Of course it won't work, Squadron Leader, he said impatiently. I can only hope that our telephone lines aren't compromised. Well, they're not on the same circuit, Barbara said hopefully, so I'll bet we can get through to somebody in town. I'm sure that there are electricians in Swansea who could help, right? This is top-drawer stuff we do here, Lieutenant, Hawthorne explained. We can't just have any civilian bloke poking about down here. There's no telling what he might see or hear. There might be a damn Jerry agent. No. We'll have to kick this up to Station L and see what our Air Commodore has to say. He'll have to send out someone who is cleared to work in our section. So until then, we're out of business, Barbara said flatly. That's about the size and shape of it, conceded Hawthorne with a heavy sigh. It's a damnable inconvenience, but what can anyone do about the weather? These things happen, and we simply have to keep our chins up. Let's find a telephone. Come along now. He carefully negotiated the several flights of steep stairs until he came to a hard, cool stone floor. He was at one end of a long passageway with several portals at intervals on either side. It was still dark, and he knew that it would remain that way until the humans could send for an electrical specialist, something that the male leader of the communications team was attempting to do even now. At the moment, one of the portals opened, and a human female bearing a burning wick sheathed in insect secretions emerged. The wick gave off a little light, but it did not extend very far, so if he did not move, there was a good chance that the female would not see him. He stood perfectly still at the base of the stairs and waited. You all stay put, Catherine Reese said to the others as they sat on their beds in the American barracks. They all had beeswax candles in their hands and worried expressions on their faces. I'll see if I can't track down Barbara and find out why we're still in the dark. Hurry, said Eunice plaintively as she sat clutching her candle in one hand and her pillow in the other. And be careful, Cat. I'll be fine, she said. Don't wander off now. With that, she shut the door and looked up and down the passageway. Her tiny candle gave off painfully little light, and she squinted into the gloom. Off to her left, about 20 feet or so away, was the landing for the stairway leading up to Roger's hut. She couldn't be sure at this distance, but there appeared to be something at the foot of the stairs, something tall. She blinked and thought perhaps her eyes were playing tricks on her. Instead, her skin broke out in goose flesh, and the hairs on the back of her neck prickled. In an instant, her curiosity almost had her take a step towards it, but the fear growing in her gut stopped her. She began slowly backing the other way down the corridor, and her hands began to tremble, making the candlelight jump and dance. Barbara, she called in a shaky voice. Group Captain. She heard faint voices coming from behind a door at the far end of the corridor and turned to run. As soon as her back was turned, she heard the sound of something wet and heavy squelching on the stone floor, coming towards her. She stifled a scream and turned to see a tall, dark-robed figure bearing down on her. Terrified, she froze and dropped her candle. Just before it hit the floor and its light was extinguished, the candle briefly revealed the figure's face beneath its hood. Catherine screamed as the corridor was again plunged into darkness. What the devil was that? Hawthorne asked as they entered the operations center. The French operators were sitting in the supervisor's table in a terrified knot. The scream was still echoing throughout the complex. It's one of my girls, Barbara said as she ran for the door which led to the barracks corridor. Steady, Lieutenant, said Hawthorne firmly. Just a moment. He went into his office at the back of the room as briskly as his bad leg would allow, and the women heard him open a drawer. He came back, buckling a weapons belt around his waist. We'll need this, he said as he drew his Webley service revolver out of its leather holster. It shone a deadly black in the low yellow light of the paraffin lamps. Never thought I'd need it down here, but it sounds like there's dirty work afoot tonight. He advanced to the door and took Carstairs' lamp. Now, you lot go into my office there and close the door and lock it tight. In the far corner behind my flight jacket is my old Lanchester. It's already loaded, mind you, so don't muck about with it. Keep control of yourselves, lassies. I'll see to this intruder. Right. The women could see that he was perspiring profusely, and his eyes were wide with fear. Barbara's heart went out to him. "Group captain," she said quickly, "let me go with you. No, lassie," he said kindly while he checked the action of his revolver. "You stay with the others in this office. I need you supervisors to see to those French operators while I'm gone. They look like they could go daft any second, and we don't want that. I'll be fine." He was interrupted by several high-pitched shrieks coming from up the hallway. "That ties it," he said grimly, and he grabbed the lamp out of Barbara's hand. "Get in the office, lasses, now!" He opened the door, stepped outside, and shut it fast behind him. Carstairs moved towards the door, but Barbara grabbed her by the arm. "You heard what he said," she hissed. "Let's go." "But your commanding officer gave you an order, squadron leader," Barbara said as she pulled her friend towards the office. "Move it." Desjardins followed them, muttering to herself, "Mon Dieu, qu'est-ce que c'est?" Barbara hustled them all into the office, closed the door, and locked it. The French operators were all muttering to themselves nervously. "Okay," she said, "that's that. Let's get the gun he talked about." She shone her lamp towards the corner where Hawthorne's old flight jacket hung on a coat tree. Carstairs reached around behind the jacket and pulled out a gleaming blue-gray Lanchester submachine gun. She examined it gingerly in the light of the lamp and saw that it was indeed loaded with a full clip and in excellent condition. "Great," Barbara said. "Right where he said it would be." She looked at the others uncomfortably. "Have any of you girls ever fired one of these?" His heart pounding, Hawthorne moved slowly down the corridor towards the American women's barracks. From his position, he could see that the door was slightly ajar, and he could hear whimpering and crying coming from within. He could also see the dark shape of a woman sprawled in the middle of the corridor several feet away. Cursing under his breath, he began to move towards her when he heard something to his right. He wheeled and found that he was pointing his weapon directly into the forehead of Victoria Hastings, who was staring at him from the mess hall door with wide eyes. "Don't shoot, group captain," she said nervously. "Bloody hell," he hissed. "Hastings, what the devil are you doing? We have an intruder loose." "Yes, sir," she whispered fiercely. "He's in there with the American gulls. He's huge, sir. I don't know." "Will you shut up and listen to me?" Hawthorne said. "I don't know who that is over there on the floor, but I need you to see to her. Take her back to the mess hall with you while I see to this bloke. Did he have any weapons you could see?" "No, sir," said Hastings, her eyes drifting down the hall to the body lying there. "He was a great oaf, though, wearing a black cloak. I never saw the face." She bit off a scream, and tears began to well up in her eyes. "Right," Hawthorne said as he moved to the far wall. "Take care of her now." While Hastings and the other British operators stole down the hall and began to drag the body back towards the mess hall, he moved with as much care as he could manage down to the American barracks door. He took a moment to extinguish the lamp and put it carefully on the floor. He could hear soft wailing and crying coming from within, and suddenly a female voice rose above the others. "What are you, anyway?" He slipped across the threshold and gently pushed the door open enough so that he could get around it. When he did, his eyes fell upon the far corner, and he caught his breath. One of the women, Eunice Bunker, lay across one of the beds with her eyes open. She wore only a dressing gown, and Hawthorne thought it very strange that she should be looking at him like that when he realized that her head was tilted at a very unusual angle and that the eyes were glassed over. A small rivulet of blood crept out of her nose, and he knew immediately that she was dead. Her neck snapped. Beyond her bed, a horrible, towering figure stood in front of the remaining two American operators, Hattie Anderson and Thelma Taylor. They were crouched in a corner behind a wooden chair upon which was piled a large, heavy cloak, and they were both holding lit candles in their trembling hands, whimpering miserably. Before them was not a man, Hawthorne could see that, but a very tall creature with a wrinkled, reddish skin and long, hideous limbs. He gasped and froze. The creature turned to face him, and he stifled a scream. The thing's 3 eyes glared at him from its forehead, and the long feelers where its hands should have been twitched menacingly. "Greetings, group captain," it said in a malign voice that filled him with terror. "You should put your weapon away now. I doubt very seriously that it would be of any use to you, given how badly your hands are shaking." "Who are you?" Hawthorne demanded in a small voice. He tried pointing his pistol at the creature, but his hands were indeed trembling, such that any shot would probably have missed. "Who I am is unimportant," said the abomination. "However, I am known to some as Wiseacre, or perhaps in your tongue, the Prophet. A curious, if somewhat apt name. Hawthorne was sickened when he noticed that the tiny mouth on the chinless face did not move when the creature spoke. "Shoot it, Group Captain, it killed Cat and Eunice," wailed Thelma. "Oh, be still," the prophet said over its shoulder. "You humans are so tiresome with your emotions." A single shot rang out, and there was a brief, intense flash as the Wembley discharged. Thelma and Hattie screamed and ducked further behind the chair. The prophet cocked his head to one side and looked slowly over its shoulder at a tiny hole in the wall. Just as slowly, it turned back to fix Hawthorne with its malignant yellow eyes. "You missed, Group Captain," it said with the slightest hint of smugness. To Hawthorne's alarm, it slowly advanced on him, and its feet made sickening, moist, squelching noises with each step. Hawthorne knew that his life was forfeit if he could not get off another shot. He drew the hammer back and cocked the Webley and aimed right between the monster's eyes. With surprising quickness, the prophet crossed the space between them and batted the pistol out of his hands before he could squeeze the trigger. It flew across the room and hit the far wall, where it discharged harmlessly into the ceiling. "Now, Group Captain," said the monster as it wrapped its feelers around Hawthorne's neck, "I sincerely hope you will have made your peace with your favorite deity." It lifted Hawthorne off of the floor and began squeezing. Hawthorne's face swelled and turned red and then purple. His eyes bugged out of their sockets and started to roll back white. He tried in vain to gulp down air, but could only open and close his mouth in vain. Just as he began to lose consciousness, he heard the crash of wood against something, and the pressure around his neck vanished. He fell to the ground, choking and gasping for air, while the blood returned to his brain. The creature wheeled around to face Thelma Taylor, who was holding the shattered remains of a wooden chair she had broken against its back. It drew back one long arm to strike the woman when another voice spoke. "Don't do it," yelled Hattie, who was now holding Hawthorne's Webley. She had it pointed right at the prophet's head, and she had the presence of mind to do so outside of the thing's long reach. She pulled back the hammer with a loud click. "Nobody else dies tonight, except maybe you." "Move away from him, you freak," snarled Thelma, brandishing a chair leg like a batter waiting for a pitch. "Well, well, well," said the prophet in a voice that registered genuine surprise. "I can honestly say that I did not see this one coming. Apparently, my sight is imperfect." Wolf Chauncey. "It's getting late, Wolf," Gibble said with a cavernous yawn. "I believe that I will turn in." He rose to leave, but staggered a bit as he did so. Hitler looked at him with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. "Joseph," he said sadly, "you're drunk." Gubbles grinned and nodded vigorously. "Yeah," he concurred. "Yeah, I agree. I am quite drunk, thank you very much. After traveling the Reich over the last week from Aachen to Munich to Dusseldorf to Berlin to Hamburg, and having to deal with monsters from, well, wherever the hell they come from, I believe that I am entitled to a little tippling." Borman made a face as if he smelled a skunk. "Look at yourself, Gubbles," he scoffed. "Your tunic is stained, your hair is a mess, and you smell like a barrel of rotten apples. The minister of propaganda, indeed." He crossed his arms with a snort and addressed Hitler. "I do not know why you put up with him, my Fuhrer," he chided. "He's not only a drunk, but he's a cad." "A cad?" Gubbles asked, feigning an injured tone. "Me, a cad? Why, Martin, you're such a bore. You always have been, and you always will be. And if I'm a drunk, you're a sot." He hiccuped, and to his right, Speer stifled a giggle. "What are you laughing at, Albert? It's true, I tell you. Martin Bormann is a bore and a sot. Perhaps I should make a sign for that and put it on the Brandenburg Gate. Don't you agree, Wolf?" Hitler's frown slowly melted, and at last he suffered the beginnings of a smile to cross his tired face. His softness for Gubbles was beginning to show. "Martin is right, Joseph," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know why I put up with you." "You do because I am the best at what I do," Gubbles said, suddenly serious and sober. "I take my job very seriously. It's my solemn duty to my Fuhrer and to my Reich." He eyed Bormann noxiously. "Yes, I drink a bit now and then, but I don't play with toy trains while the skies over the fatherland are filled with Allied planes which bomb our cities like that obese fool Goring. I am the Gauleiter of Berlin in addition to my propaganda ministry duties. I spend more time on the Autobahns and in the cities making speeches and rallying the Volk than I do at home with Magda and my Kinder. When Augsburg was bombed, who was there the next day to rally the workers so that Raider and Donuts could keep getting diesels for their precious U-boats? What about when the dams were breached at Mon, Eder, and Inepe and flooded the Ruhr Valley? Who visited the miners, farmers, and factory workers and told them how important their work was to our war effort and encouraged them to carry on? Who spent 3 days in Hamburg as our Volk cleaned up the ruined city, telling them that despite the hell they had just endured, we are winning this war? Who keeps getting factory workers to report for work after 3/4 or more of their workplaces have been bombed out? If you know who that man is, Martin, then perhaps you understand why our Fuhrer puts up with him. He rose again and half bowed to Hitler. I am indeed sorry to have made such a scene, Wolf, but sometimes this man is simply too much for me to bear. For my part, I often wonder why you put up with him. Hitler's smile vanished. I know what you mean to me and to the Reich, Joseph, he said bravely. You should not let Martin goad you so, and you would not take it to heart if you did not drink so much. Goebbels' face flushed, and he looked down at the floor. When we last met, you and I had some harsh words, Hitler continued. I want you to know that I have forgiven your unfortunate remarks and that I value your counsel just as I always have. Goebbels shifted his feet. Thank you, my Fuhrer, he mumbled. Once again, I'm sorry for making a scene here tonight. Hitler held up his hand, silencing him. No more apologies tonight, Joseph, he said kindly, but no more liquor either. Go to bed. I will need all of your faculties tomorrow and in the days ahead. Goebbels extended his right arm and said quietly, Heil Hitler. He gave a curt bow and left the room. I truly hate that man, Bormann said, yawning. If it's any consolation, Martin, the Fuhrer said sharply, he hates you just as much. Unfortunately, I need both of you, and I would encourage you to get along with him. Bormann chuckled, but Speer looked worried. Hitler's gaze now fell on his chief architect. And you, Speer, what's troubling you now? Still worried about the boogeymen, are you? Bormann asked with a snicker. I don't feel it's a laughing matter, Martin, Speer said. He rose and walked over to the bar where he set his empty glass down. I'm still puzzling over the Scotland business. If there were anything of value there, our people would know of it, no? Bormann shrugged. We have spies all over Britain, he said, a few of which operated out of Glasgow and Edinburgh. I don't recall anything coming across my desk from any of them that mentioned any sort of super weapon or great discovery in Scotland. Most of it is routine. Himmler could probably shed some light on the matter, better than I. Of course, we all know that Scotland was where that traitor Hess was captured back in 41, but I dare say that has little, if anything, to do with our visitors. He stopped as if he had just remembered something and gave a little chortle. There was one thing, however, he said, crossing his legs casually and putting his hands behind his head. I remember seeing something about it a couple of years ago from our man in Edinburgh. He said he'd been shadowing a Highlands regiment that had transited through Inverness on the shores of that inland lake up there. I can't remember the name of it right now. Loch Lomond? Loch Rannoch? Loch Ness? Speer prompted. There are several of them up there, Martin. Bormann snapped his fingers and nodded. Yeah, that's the one, Loch Ness. A strange name, but then it's a strange little country. It seems that the locals up there swear that there is some sort of sea monster in the waters of that lake. It's apparently very deep, deeper than any other body of fresh water in the whole of Britain, something on the order of nearly 300 meters. Hitler's eyebrows shot up. That is deep, indeed, he said, his interest now piqued. A sea monster. How interesting, if true. Continue, Martin. In any event, there are supposedly actual photographs of the monster somewhere, and our man indicated in one of his reports that he had seen them, the photographs, I mean, and had contacted Himmler's section for more information. I don't know if this has anything to do with our visitors or not, but it is the only odd thing that I can recall. Our man, he was SS? Hitler asked. Yeah, an SS Oberst, I believe, which I thought strange at the time, as that's a rather high rank for a field agent. Do you remember his name or his unit? 9. Although I'm sure Himmler could dig it up for us. The man would have been Struppe, part of the combat support force, and not detached from your personal bodyguard. He laughed somewhat incredulously as he saw that Hitler was puzzling over this new information. You really don't think this business about a sea monster has anything to do with Der Besucher, do you? Hitler did not immediately answer and instead rubbed his face slowly with both hands, a habit that Bormann recognized as meaning that the Fuhrer was tired and thinking about bed. It is getting late, my Fuhrer. Do you want to retire for the evening? I know Speer is ready for sleep where he stands. Look at the circles beneath his eyes. I'm fine, Speer lied even as he stifled a yawn. A sea monster. What else do you know about this, Martin? Just that, he said with another shrug. The locals refer to the creature as Nessie, I believe, and take the matter quite seriously by all accounts. I did not know that I would place much stock in it, however, since the Scottish people are notorious. I want to learn more about this, Martin, Hitler said sternly. Speak with Heinrich and see that the SS man has been rotated back to the fatherland yet. If he has, arrange a meeting promptly. In any event, get me everything you can about this Nessie. You think it might be significant? Speer asked. If I had told you back in January, Hitler said, fixing him with a steely gaze, that by this date Il Duce would be deposed and that a field marshal of the Wehrmacht would violate his orders and surrender to Russians, no less, and that our greatest port city would be burned to ashes, and that our U-boat fleet would be reduced to a coastal defense force, and that creatures from a faraway world would join our fight to apparently harvest something from Scotland, you probably would have said, Mein Führer, you are overworked and in need of a holiday. He gave a short, barking laugh that was devoid of mirth. And I would have agreed with you, but no. But to our surprise, all of these things have come to pass. So yes, I think the matter could be significant. Martin here will gather the information for me, and I will consult with my astrologer. I believe it was the English bard who said, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. I doubt that even Shakespeare believed in sea monsters, my Fuhrer, Bormann observed. It does not matter to you or I or Shakespeare. It does not matter what you or I or Shakespeare believe, Martin, Hitler replied. It does, however, matter if der Besucher believe in it, if indeed this is what they seek. The more we know of their intentions, real or imagined, the more effectively we can deal with them at the appropriate time. He stood. Now, I will take some tea and rest for a while. You men should rest too. You both look like kake. U-534. This damned moon's going to be trouble for us, Wirtz said, as he looked up at the now cloudless sky and the moon high overhead. He turned his binoculars north towards the dark outline, the coastline of Wales. There were no lights. Those British subjects living on the coast were subject to a strict wartime blackout, and it was well after midnight. And he could see no living things, human or animal, on the dark green farmlands, nor on the beach-covered cliffs to the northeast. He stood at the base of the conning tower on the forward edge just after the deck gun, leaning against the shell plating as the U-boat motored on the surface and recharged her batteries. He had ordered the trim tanks refilled so that the sub sat even lower in the water than normal, and the waters of the Bristol Channel swirled around his boots. I feel like there are hundreds of English eyes watching us right now. I don't see any small patrol craft, von Kuiper observed next to him as he scanned the waters of the Bristol Channel. Perhaps the Tommies turned in early. If so, perhaps we could lob a few shells their way and disturb their weird, limey dreams. Don't tempt me, Wirtz said. I'd like nothing better than to hit an ammunition dump or an airfield or even a barracks, but all I can see around here are farms. Farms that feed the Tommies, von Kuiper pointed out. The British Army marches on its stomach, mein Captain. All armies do, Herman. He pulled his gold watch out of his trouser pocket. Another 30 minutes recharge time, don't you think? Von Kuiper looked at it for a moment. Yeah, another half hour on the surface, and then we find a deep spot to ride out the daylight hours. I have a place picked out already. Where? Von Kuiper indicated a point about 45 degrees off the port bow. Look there, he said as he pointed. There is a stream that runs out of the highlands into a little bay over there. I don't know its name, but you can see 3 cliffs rising up around it. Where the stream empties into the channel, it has been dredged by the Tommies, or so our charts say. Wirtz scowled as he studied the place through his ice binoculars. I hope the charts are up to date, he said. How deep a place are we talking about up there? 50 to 65 meters, depending on the dredging schedule. If the water were clear, that might present a problem. However, there's been quite a bit of rain here recently, and you can see that the stream is swollen now. Wirtz nodded and grinned. This means the water in the little bay will be muddy and noisy, a perfect place for us to hide during the day. British planes will not be able to see us from the air, and their patrol craft won't be able to hear us. Excellent, Herman. Once our batteries are fully charged, see to it. USS Barb. Looks like she's turning to port, Dunaway observed. He could just barely make out the shape of S-21 on the horizon as she made a sweeping left turn. The moon was sufficiently bright that the bridge crew could now see the old boat as a dark shape low on the water. Barb was turning to starboard away from her sister and into the mouth of the Bristol Channel. Returning to her patrol station, Matthews said with a shake of his head. That Snell is one stubborn bastard. Remind me to buy him a drink at the Oak Club when we get back to Portsmouth. I think he owes you one, Skipper, Dunaway said. And if he does make it back, he better start going to church again because he's going to owe one to the big guy as well. He's going to need divine intervention to bring that ancient pig boat back in one piece. Yeah, that's a fact. Okay, S-24 is out of our hands for now. It's time to see if my hunch is correct. Have the radar paint this whole channel, and let's see if Jerry is topside recharging his batteries. If he is, we'll give the Brit Coasties something to watch. Yeah, if anybody is awake at this godforsaken hour around here. Oh, they're awake, all right. You don't know these limeys like I do. I guarantee you every bit of high ground that you can see has a Brit on top of it, and he'll have a pair of binoculars and a radio handy. After what happened in 1940, they take their civil events pretty damn seriously. When they see Jerry tooling around in here, they'll go ape. I only hope they'll give us a chance to take the guy out and not mistake us for a U-boat. That would be bad. You've been hanging around the Brits too much, Skipper. You're developing their habit for understatement. Coastal Observation Post SP, Pobbles Bay, Wales. Gildas Dumville took a bite of his Glamorgan sausage and chewed thoughtfully while his eyes scanned the waters of Three Cliffs Bay some 75 feet below him. He sat on an old disused lawn chair behind an ancient beech stump that served as his working desk and meal table. Around him in the grove of beeches atop the limestone of Pobble's Cliff, night birds piped softly and crickets chirped. A retired colours sergeant of the Royal Welsh Fusiliers, Gildas had served the crown with distinction and bravery during the Great War, guiding his regiment's ensigns under fire as the Allies tried to break the Kaiser's lines and draw the German forces away from Verdun in the autumn of 1916. It had been a bloody, costly campaign for both sides, and Gildas felt fortunate to have made it through the battle with only a broken leg, courtesy of a German machine gun. The leg had not healed properly at the field hospital, so he had been rotated back to his regiment's headquarters in Cardigan, where he accepted a post in the Fusiliers Reserve Battalion. After the war, he kept his reserve status and helped train new recruits. The Fusiliers organized a platoon out of Swansea during the late 20s, and Gildas volunteered to move to a small farm on that coastal village where he met and wed Gwyneth Morgan. This union produced 2 sons and 3 daughters between 1929 and 1940, and the Dumville farm grew along with the family. Gildas, now in his early 50s, became the county's coast observer when war broke out in 1939 and spent several hours every day at the top of Pobble's Cliff, sitting in his lawn chair and watching the waters of the Bristol Channel. Propped against a tree next to him was his Lee Enfield rifle that had been his since the Great War, his handy talkie that linked him with his brother watchers on the nearby cliffs of Tor Bay and Pinard Burrows, as well as his expensive Swarovski binoculars. And as always, at his side was his old metal mess kit, containing whatever victuals Gwyneth would pack for him, usually Glamorgan sausages, or a tin of lobscouse, or perhaps faggots and peas, one of his favorites. A vacuum flask full of tea helped him stay awake during the long nights. Tonight, however, he had only his sausage and tea to sustain him during the small hours. An unopened tin of McVitie's chocolate digestives would be his tasty morsel for later. He unscrewed the top of the flask and poured himself a steaming tin mug of strong black Twinings. For his late-night, early-morning duty, he always brewed his tea with double the leaves and drank it without cream or sugar to better endure the stay-awake caffeine. The tea was still very hot. He had come on duty at midnight and had the watch until dawn, and it scalded his tongue as he took the first sip. It tasted good after enduring the rains from the storms earlier that evening. After another sip, he raised his binoculars to his eyes and scanned the horizon in sectors, gradually moving closer in toward shore. He rarely had seen anything out of the ordinary during his time as a coastal observer, except once during the Blitz. A damaged German Heinkel HE-111 bomber chased by a stubborn Spitfire after having dropped its load over London had crashed into the very middle of the channel where it sank like a stone. Gildas had waited all day for some wreckage to come to the surface, but the only thing that rose from the depths of the water was the body of the German bomb aimer. Gildas waited for the tide to sweep the body into the bay, and it finally deposited the dead German on the beach at the foot of Pennard Castle, where the Pennard Prill entered the waters of the bay after its journey down from the hills to the north. Gildas had appropriated the German aviator's Luger pistol as the spoil of war and still kept it under his tunic, tucked into his trousers. He continued to scan the waters and paused when he saw disturbance on the otherwise calm surface. It appeared to be the remnants of a ship's wake, which he thought odd as all of the coastal patrol craft were supposed to be further out, guarding the mouth of the Bristol Channel. Frowning, he followed the wake in toward shore until he came upon the long, low shape of a vessel with very little freeboard and small superstructure. He caught his breath and swore. There was no doubt about it. He was looking at a submarine. Hurriedly, he reached for his handy-talkie and spilled his tea. Luckily, he was still wearing his old Army weatherproof jacket and didn't get any tea on his tunic or trousers. He brought the radio to his face with one hand while holding his binoculars with the other. "Dinged, mate. How do you read me? Over?" he said into the radio. There was a burst of static that made him smart, and then a voice answered him. "I'm here, Gildas," said the voice of Dinged Claiborne, the coastal observers on Tor Bay, less than a mile to Gildas's left. "Are me eyes deceiving me, or is there a bloody submarine right here in the channel?" There was a pause, and then another loud burst of static. "Blimey, you're spot on, lad. I see her. She's not one of ours, is she now?" "I can't tell in this light. Me eyes aren't what they used to be, mate." "Nobody said nothing to us about any subs in the channel, have they?" "I'll bet you're a fiver that's a flaming U-boat. None of our subs would be here." "Well, if it was a Jerry boat, one of us better ended to town and report it." Gildas considered that for a moment. "You go, Dinged," he said at last. "You has the better motor. Run down and wake the local minister. We need to get some lads up here with a motor or something." "I'm on it, laddie. You keep your eyes on him, and I'll be back in a jiff." About a mile away, atop the limestone cliff overlooking Tor Bay, Dinged Claiborne hurriedly gathered his gear and limped back to his car. A black and gray 1935 Standard 9 saloon parked deep in the beech grove on the backside of the cliff. Dinged had been a friend of Gildas's since before the Great War, although they had served in different units. The diminutive Dinged had risen to the rank of staff sergeant in the 22nd Cheshire Regiment and had suffered a painful spinal injury at Verdun, which had left him nearly crippled. After being rotated back to Wales and after undergoing months of physical therapy, he finally was able to walk again after a fashion. Like many of his fellow Great War survivors, Dinged remained in the reserve forces and found work as a coastal observer when the demand rose in 1939. Now he hurried as best as he could to his standard, piled his gear in the boot, and fired up the four-cylinder engine. As he negotiated his way down the slope and through the beaches, he mumbled excitedly to himself. "A bloody U-boat," he said as he weaved through the trees. "Here in Swansea. Well, we'll see about that, we will." The road to Swansea ran along the windward base of the cliff, and Dinged bounded the Standard out of the trees onto its muddy surface. The recent rain had reduced the road to a slick mess, and Dinged found himself fishtailing and swerving crazily. He tried to correct his steering and slow down, but his tires were nearly bald, and he could not get any traction. He careened off the road and headed for a thick stand of ancient oaks off to the right. The Standard hit a huge, aged oak head-on. The force of the impact crumpled the front bumper, wrecked the radiator, and propelled Dinged through the windscreen and against the 4-foot-wide bowl. His head split open and his skull cracked like an eggshell. Dinged lay dying, his broken body sprawled across the bonnet of his Standard. He would never make it to the Swansea Coastal Defense Minister's office to warn of the U-boat in the channel, and it would be long after daybreak before any of his friends would find his body, during which time many things would happen. All right, kids, that is it for the for Chapter 10 in Cloaks and Barbs tonight. Got Chapter 11 coming up tomorrow. And like I say, things are happening real quickly in the book, and definitely would encourage you to tune in if you're enjoying it. And I certainly hope that you are. So be sure to follow me on X and on YouTube. I am working on reaction videos. I've got one recorded but not edited. It is a music reaction video, and my youngest, sweet baby James, is helping me with a reaction video going on one of the games we used to play, one of the video games we used to play. So he seems to think that would be a good thing for me to post as well, and I'm inclined to agree. So, but it is late. I've got a busy day tomorrow, as I'm sure you do. So thank you for tuning in and listening, and be sure to tune in again. Episode 21. I can't believe we got 20 in the can. It's just crazy. Never thought I'd do any of this, much less have 20 episodes done. So, on behalf of my staff, which tonight is only Finland, I'm going to sign off here and wish you all a very good evening. So, live long and prosper.